Welcome to LFTF, the podcast about turning your webinars and virtual events into lead-generating machines and advancing your business objectives. With me, as usual, Matthew Lay, the president of the Streaming Network.
Thanks for having me, Pete, on this Friday before a long weekend when the weather is beautiful and we expect rain, and instead I am here with you recording 2 months of content.
The shine is not the sun coming in on our faces here. It is studio lighting, but it is the beginning of the summer.
It is.
And if you're watching this on demand, perhaps it's not where you are, people in the future, but this is summertime here in Toronto, Canada.
That's right.
And what we want to talk about is using simulated live webinars and driving MQL, driving your MQL goals through the summer.
That's right.
Now, this is something that's near and dear to your heart. This is a subject you want to talk about. So, why do we want to talk about this today? Why is this important?
All right. Well, simulated live is been talked about on this show and emails that you receive and you know, we had a client in this morning doing a tour, and we talked a lot about it as a tactic to handle presenter nerves, to handle things like can't get people in at the right time, so you want to record so you can simulate it live, or making the best use out of a day in the studio where you can record 2 or 3 and get a good ROI. But we've also talked, I hope you remember here, about how simulated live is great for helping you hit your ROI targets or your lead targets within your webinar program.
Yes,
you remember?
I do remember, of course.
Right. So generally speaking, when people ask how do I get more ROI on my webinar program, I say webinar more, do more webinars, but you don't have to always do new content. You can use old content and utilize the simulated live methodology.
Right, which is the key to this whole thing. And that's when we talked about doing the Shark Week of webinars.
That's right.
Yes.
Right. So people are listening, or they come up with it on their own, or it was never my idea to begin with. I don't remember. And so many of the customers and the prospects that we're speaking to are saying that this is something that they are either doing or want to do. And some of them are struggling on the how to get it done. And so as summer is a time that we generally look back at how our businesses are doing and marketing departments, where we're at as far as our targets and our goals are for MQLs or leads, it's a really good time to think about utilizing that Shark Week Summit, repurposing Simulive as a way of getting yourself ready for the next buying season, which generally occurs when everyone's back from vacation in the fall.
Right. And the idea being to get more people out, watching your webinars, engage in your webinars more often. And so what are some of the ways you want to get more people involved? But it's summertime.
That's right. Well, so summertime proposes its own set of problems, is that you've got your own vacations, your speakers, your thought leaders, and those people have theirs. So it's a tougher time to create a lot of new content. But at the same time, there's a whole bunch of people in our target audience who are sitting in offices that have less humans there and have less sort of initiatives on their plate. And so they may want to spend a Friday morning or afternoon or a couple extra time watching webinars. Right. So it's a good time to broadcast webinars, although it's hard to get a lot of new content going, which is why we are proposing in this podcast the idea we talked about a couple sessions ago about this idea of doing summits or repurposing your content to get people out. But I want to dive into exactly how to do that with some programs that we've got planned for ourselves this summer and for the next couple months.
Excellent. Okay. So you've got people, they've got some free time on their hands.
Yeah.
They want to engage. They still want to do professional development. Summer actually is a really good time to do that sort of stuff.
It is, yeah.
Okay. Well, so how do we start?
Okay. So where we want to start is you want to start with basically taking stock of what you got. So you got 6 months under your belt. For us, I'm basically taking stock of this show. Mm-hmm. So we've got 6 months, which would mean at least 12 podcasts or videos that we've done, 12 sessions. And you want to look at, if they're delivered over webinar or you have data sets on them, you want to look at what performed the best. Like, what is the content that when you put it out there, maybe you knew it going into it because it was your economic update or your big sort of thought leadership event, but you want to put it in there and see what worked the best. And then second, I would usually look at which webinars or videos or series or things that you did that you think you got unlucky. It was a great program. You thought it was awesome. Anyone who heard it thought it was awesome, but for some reason, it just didn't get people out. You didn't get the registrants or you didn't get the viewers. So you have a low performance or a low on-demand performance.
Right.
And try and give those ones another shot.
So you run them, you run them simulated live, but how is this different? Like I'm not understanding like what.
Just wait, okay? So you're right. Eventually, we're going to run these simulated live,
Yeah.
right? But other things that you want to do is you want to take those webinars or that content, and you want to group them into topics or with similarities, right? So in our case, we did a bunch of stuff on how marketers can drive more ROI, like this piece right here, stuff on engagement tools, reporting, analytics, what you should focus on. We spent a fair amount of time this year talking about the craft of being a webinar producer. So whether it be the how to be a good moderator or how to put together a show format that's going to work for your audience, things like that. And we also got into, we always mix it in, a little bit on the old-fashioned virtual event, webcast, hybrid event, planning, inspiration, and that sort of thing. So I've got sort of three main topics that I can lump most of my stuff into: the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Right. Okay. I think I understand where you're going. I think I'm getting it.
Yeah.
I'm grasping the
You're grasping
nuances.
where I'm
Yeah.
going.
Okay.
Yeah.
So keep going.
All right, so that basically gets you to your to the idea that you can now group these together and they become more valuable. So when I offer up, the promise of this piece right here, whether it be a podcast, a video, or a webinar, is how to hit your MQL goals by summer. But to your point, what if someone's coming to this in October? Did they miss the boat? So what we do is we look to group these assets together, find other assets that can go with them to add value. So how do we find those other assets? So what I did was I looked at partners who I know share content with me well and easily. So I've got On24 has done a couple good pieces in the past 6 months that were part of this that fit into these three categories. I've got a reciprocal relationship with Demand Metric, and they did a piece that I really liked that fits in well. And then I've got our agency did their own thing on a YouTube Live or a Facebook live stream that was really good for part of this as well. And I look at my non-webinar assets like my ebooks and my calculators and anything else that we've got that sort of fits into these various categories. So at this point, I've created nothing new, but I've got a whole bunch of content that is relatable to one another that I can now promote and say, rather than coming and watching this one webinar and learning this, sign up for this summit or whatever it might be, and you will get X, Y, and Z.
Right.
Stuff from different sources, different types of content. You're going to get 8 assets that will help you reach your ROI goals, or 8 assets that will help you be a better virtual event planner, or whatever the topic might be.
Right. So you reach out to all your providers, and you bring. Now you're not bringing them together again.
No, I'm just asking them. Can I with On24? I'm like, can I just use this webinar? And they're like, yeah. So we copy it. Demand Metric, they're on the platform too. Same thing. Get the video file from the agency and get permission to sort of release it, because eventually what we're going to do is we're going to release these either on demand together or simulated live in our summit. So they're not even going to be a part of it either. They're not going to be there that day.
Right.
No one is. In fact, I think I talk about it later. One of the tentative dates that we're playing around with, I'm on vacation, so I'm not even going to be around.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Gotcha. So everyone says yes.
Yes.
Everyone's in. They all
Yeah.
get your pitch to them.
Yeah. And so I've got them all together. At the same time, what I'm doing and what I have to do is I have to start segmenting my audience on who I'm going to invite to these and figure out how I'm going to manage a promotional schedule over 3 months that is going to make the best use of this. So segmentation means you don't want to be inviting the same people to the same webinar, podcast, video they already saw. So you want to make sure that you're segmenting properly so you're focusing your attention on the right group of people. Those who are interested in the virtual event planning and inspiration there are a slightly different audience than the webinar craft, and definitely a different audience than the leads or the ROI group. So I try and do the best I can in segmenting those groups so that when we start promoting it, we can target the right folks.
Right. Right.
So getting that data side and knowing, who is the audience, who is the demographic that you're focusing is the next step in all of this before you can even get moving.
Right. And is that considered a challenge? Is that too hard in some instances?
In some instances, it unfortunately is too hard.
Yeah.
And I'll say that even for us, we're not the most data tight organization out there. We have a lot of feeding data sources that come in from a leads and information perspective. So for us, it's not the easiest thing either. And for a lot of our customers, this is where it falls down. Mm-hmm. A fear of oversaturating their list, a fear that they already offered this kind of stuff and they don't want to send it out to the same people again. So there is a concern about that, and it's okay. There are ways of handling it. I saw a customer do this, which played really well, which was just be completely transparent. It's halfway through the year. We've done a ton of stuff on the craft of webinars. You may have caught our podcast or this series or that series. If you didn't, come to this webinar series. It's going to have these points on it. It may be important for you. That way, even if they were invited or already heard it, they can decide not to come, and you're not, it's not a big deal. There's no lunch bag let down. You've always got new blood in your list, so you're going to hit people who weren't around when we did it the first time, or people who just forgot about it and never attended it. So it's being transparent and honest. And if you really can't segment your list, you may not want to do 3 things like I'm doing, maybe do 2, but give the audience the choice. We have these 2 summits coming up. One's on this, one's on that. Track A, track B. Register now for each one.
You may not have seen this one. You
Whatever's
saw this
important.
one.
Yeah.
You have lead-ins and
sort of
things
bring
like
them together. Because in our case, and I'm sure in our customers' cases, these might be 2 different summits or 3 different summits, depending on what you're looking at. And we have a third strategy that we're going to discuss. They're all targeted at people who would use our product or service. So there is crossover, and it's fine. Just like a conference that has different tracks, we're going to offer different tracks, and people can opt into the one they want.
Gotcha. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about the craft then.
Yeah.
Like anything, creating something like this requires a certain approach,
yeah.
certain creativity.
Yeah.
So let's.
I don't know how much creativity. Hopefully the content stands on its own. But I think
But there is a craft to it.
Well, there's a craft. There's a few simple things that you're going to want to do, right? So if you're going to give people a value of 10 assets or 20 assets, 4 webinars or 1, or whatever it is, then you're going to want them to opt in through one place, right? So creating a landing page. We use Unbounce, a great Canadian company out of Vancouver, cost effective, ties into our platform quite easily. And we're going to allow people to register for the craft of webinars or the virtual event planning one through 2 different Unbounce pages.
Right.
So they will see on that page all the various assets that they're going to get, the fact we'll send them the recordings, the fact that it'll be available on demand, the fact they'll get these ebooks, and all that fun stuff. And we're going to let them register once for this Friday in July or August, where they're going to be able to attend and view it all, or get the on demand afterwards. That link will also house all the on demand recordings afterwards as well, so anyone who didn't show up can come back.
Right.
So make it easy for them, push to that date, and we're going to clear our general promotional schedules for both months around that. That'll be the only 2 things that we're doing. So we're going to make them the focus.
Right.
And by making them the focus, it's going to allow us to employ other strategies that don't mess with other things we might have going on. So one strategy is we're going to put a link in our customer service response signatures, client services, CSMs, and all of that. So they're also pushing people towards it. Clearly, sales will be able to do it as well, and they're sort of their leave behinds and their summer prospecting. And in our standard emails that go out to either our user group or our Friday email where people learn about this podcast, we're going to invite people in there as well. So it'll be a call to action that goes for the entirety of a month before we switch over to the second call to action that we will be promoting for the next month.
Right. And it doesn't even necessarily have to be video. It could just be audio, whatever the...
The format doesn't matter. It's whatever you're doing today,
Yeah.
whatever you're doing right now. Yeah.
Good. So let's talk about ROI.
Yeah.
Obviously, that's the thing, right? That's what these things are always driving towards. What's the ROI? Where's our focus on that?
Our focus for our own ROI, not our ROI series, but our focus for our own ROI is what everyone wants, is to get more out of less, right? So there's some work that needs to be done here, but the amount of work to do what we're talking about versus the amount of work of putting on a live summit in the summer is completely different, right? So we got a landing page, which most of you already have templates for. It's just about filling in the content, You've got to make the work the plan. What's the stuff that you're going to use? We actually have planned to do two simulated live days and then one just aggregation of content. So we're going to be introducing a new way of accessing our content on our website. Something that we're playing around with is like this webinar masterclass series. So a bunch of the content that's relative to that, our webinar sort of getting return on investment stuff, is going to go there as the reason to sign up for the masterclass. And that's all on demand. We're not going to do anything live about that. That's going to be evergreen. It's just going to be kind of always running for us. But the big call to action is we're launching this masterclass series. Come on in and you'll get access to all of the stuff. Sign up. And for, this summer we're launching these 8 things that are the big driver to go into it. But in every case, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to take all of this content that we did all year long, the best of it, the stuff that we want to highlight, and get as many people as possible to consume it. So where a lot of the podcast content we release for free on podcast networks, on our blog, on YouTube, as we put it into a webinar format, which we often do, and make it a part of the summit, we're able to track everyone who watches them, whether live or on demand, completely, value the platform, and get that information into our CRM so we can take people into that MQL status, which is what we're looking for, to move people through the process and get them consuming our content in the summer, tracking it so that we've got a nice pipeline for the fall. Right? So basically, our general strategy has been 3 programs throughout the summer only. All 3 programs are going to be aggregating of content. 2 will be live summits, and 1 will be this just collection of on-demand assets that's going into this new program called the Masterclass Series. And from there, it's going to be about promoting it through email, like we said, with a segmented list, but also this is where we're going to put our ad buys towards. They're going to be to each of these segments so we can get new blood in and get people consuming and making sure that we're in a position, which we are, because it's on the webinar tool and not on social media or on the podcast network. We're going to be able to track who's watched what, how long, and who is the most engaged so that we can ensure that they are sort of that MQL.
So summertime, obviously, it has its own unique challenges in terms of promotion, in terms of driving traffic. Now, you talk about getting ad buys out there, but are there things to do to attract people? Is there a different way of doing it?
Maybe, but we're like most people on this also strapped with limited budgets, right? So we're going to get what is the most ROI. Most people register for these things still from an email.
Right.
And although ad buying, we've seen success in certain targeted like lookalike audiences through LinkedIn and the like, we are going to supplement it with that. But the main way that we're going to get people through this is going to be people that we sort of invite ourselves or people that we reach out to and get into it to see the great content that we believe we've produced over the last 6 months. Are there other ways that I've seen effective? Truly, yes, there is. There's been given personal invites in the mail to attend these things. I've been called and personally invited if you have cycles to do those things. But I think that's another webinar on how to get people out through that non-conventional. The key here is what I want to get across is, once you've pulled your content together in such a way and you know what segments you're going after, that you can quite easily reuse your content in a new way. And that new way is simply by lumping it together with other valuable content.
Gotcha. Okay. One of the things we want to talk about is this is hard for some people.
Yeah.
The difficulty. Like, what are the challenges in terms of pulling this together?
Yeah. So I think we've already talked about one challenge, which is the data, because if you want to email people, you've got that fear.
Yeah.
And then the other one, which is, I think, if you're less prolific than we are, so we're in a fairly unique situation where we're highly prolific in our content creation, but we have a lot of new data sources of sort of, I call them webinar, people are learning the webinar craft but aren't maybe ready to buy or anything like that. And so we know that there is a high volume of people in our databases that have not seen the content that we presented this year. It's simple.
Right.
Maybe it's our relationship. I don't know. We're kind of unique in that. So for people who weren't as prolific as us, but so they're more worried about the fact that they've promoted this all to this database. The database has very limited movement in it. They're not sure about the ad buying side of it, so they think there's a lot of work for nothing, and they're just going to be sending the same stuff to the same people. That's the concern that I think that will make some people here say it's going to be too hard for me to make sure I don't piss off people on my list and get that awful opt-out that I don't want to do. It's going to be counterintuitive for me. And to them, I say, you might be overthinking it, but you might not. And so one strategy that I've put forward, and we're gonna have to do it in one of our series, just based around the way the content played out, is by you yourself or somebody on your team producing another piece of content, but way before you get. I said there wasn't gonna be a lot of new content produced, which is taking webinars, content maybe from that you've recorded at maybe one of your conferences. You might have some of that hasn't been used. Maybe you get some of this third-party content in, and then having someone record a webinar or webinars where you throw to the content the way that a news anchor throws to pre-recorded segments that happened earlier that day. And this doesn't have to be done in a studio or anything like this. It can be done over audio, where you simply say, okay, today we're talking about, I don't know, the craft of webinars. And in the craft of webinars, I'm going to start off with, how to be a great moderator. It's an important subject, and we're going to start with 15 minutes from a podcast that was released earlier this year, where Matt goes through how he becomes a moderator. So let's go to that, and then we'll take your questions and do whatever. And then you push that video as a slide, or there's many ways different platforms do it, but then you go to that becomes the basis of that webinar, and then it comes back and you get sort of questions answered or whatever, and move on to the next topic. So you're using the video or the former webinar or the content that you've produced in those webinars that you've gotten from different sources, and you create an agenda of maybe 2 hours where you're pushing out these things, snippets from these things. So it would be framed differently even for the same audience. Hopefully it's a more complete thought for them too, and allows you to offer up a new and unique piece of content to everyone. That's for the people who are afraid that they've saturated their audience. They're not going to show up to the same webinar, or be mad if they show up to the same webinar they already have.
So it's interesting because ultimately, you're planning your marketing around 12 months of the year. This is a great strategy for what to do in the summer. If you know what's coming around, you can be planning. You don't even have to necessarily be shooting new stuff in the summer because you know it's coming. So you just, whenever you're set up doing another webinar, do that summer piece, right? Do that piece that we're going to insert in the summer because no one's going to be around, and we can just kind of piece it all together.
Yeah, and I think this is something that we've been planning kind of all year, and the way that we plan. So I'm sure the way a lot of people plan, right? Reactive, we change, whatever. We kind of been planning this all year and talking about it, but sort of hadn't gotten around to it. And the impetus for making it happen was the same thing that everyone else is. We don't have the MQL lead flow that we want right now. We've been investigating and looking at different ways that we want to make that happen. This was one that was on the roadmap and needed to be done. And we, in our content strategy, maybe a little bit easier for us than those who are coming at it as a brand new idea. We did have things kind of lumped already. It was easy to pick out which ones are this, which ones are that, and which ones are flyers, like our not-for-profit or our legal webinars, podcasts that have nothing to do with what we're talking about here. So this was an easier strategy for me in pulling together what assets that I wanted or needed.
Right.
So it's something that I'm hearing my own prospects now that we're coming to first telling me they're doing. It's something that I've seen work well. I've signed up for these, and so it's a strategy that clearly is working out there in the market. And this was the attempt here today was to get a little more granular in how to make it happen.
Right. And it's important insights because ultimately any show is taking advantage of tendencies amongst the audience. Mm-hmm. And we know audiences they have a little more free time. Yep. This is the kind of stuff they won't necessarily be consuming as they head towards year end when they're busy and they're doing budgets. This is the perfect time to do this thing. It's a good audience insight, and it's a good strategy around that.
Yeah, and if they're gonna invest the time, it's kind of like, when you listen to this podcast, right? Today is about this one strategy. And if you come to it, you're like, great, but what do you do the rest of the year, right? And you go back and find another one or whatever it is. Well, what we're trying to do, or most people try and do, is they try and get around a topic more holistically with one of these summits. Mm-hmm. It's not 5 pieces of content that don't relate to one another. It's like walk away from the craft of our webinar summit and learn, how to be a moderator, how to create a show format, how to insert your engagement things. Basically, walk away from that and be like, okay, I know the craft now. I'm going to make my next webinar awesome because I'm going to employ these 10 things that I saw from start to finish. And so it can be a better learning. It's not just about perceptually they're getting more. If they spend the time with the content, they're in the mindset of the craft of webinars, they're going to get more out of it. They're going to come away with it as a pretty darn good webinar producer if they invest all that time with us.
Right. Excellent. Excellent. Well, good advice for the summer.
Yeah.
Good advice as we launch into the summer.
That's right.
That everyone hopefully takes that. Matthew Lay.
Yes.
Thank you so much for these great insights.
And thanks for having me on again the Friday before the long
Friday
weekend.
before the
when I'd
long
like to be
weekend.
somewhere else.
Well, we can go now. We can go have a
Yeah.
have a Mai Tai.
There you go.
As usual, this is LFTF. Send us questions, send us comments, and we'll see you next time.